And in fact, one of the most recent things that impacts all of us, and as you're looking at the news can see it, Chuck prophesied that we were moving into a season, and would it be by this spring, and I think even maybe by April specifically, you said, Chuck, that there would be an atmosphere of war, and you didn't say it would necessarily be the kind of conflict we're seeing between Russia and Ukraine, but there would be a time of war. So look, can you elaborate on that a little?
Well, actually, when I was coming to your gathering there in Cedar Creek over in your area, the Lord spoke to me. He said, kings go to war in spring. Mm-hmm. And I kept pondering it. Chad was driving. I think Daniel and Amber were with us. And I kept pondering, saying, Lord, what are you saying? Because anytime I'm with you two, I feel like it opens up a portal for me to hear in a way that I don't always hear, because I feel like I come under that apostolic prophetic mantle that you have. And so it was easy for me to hear that, and I could prophesy. So I went to Mike's 2 Samuel chapter 11, where David should have gone to war against the Arameans, and he didn't do that. And what it caused when he didn't go to war. And the Lord began to say two things to me. He began to show me, first of all, that the war would be, and I did think Russia and China, of course, because I have such background with Russia and China starting in the 80s. And I did think Russia. And but what the Lord spoke to me was, we cannot be passive starting in spring. Now, that's really what he spoke, that the passivity that has been on the body, that where we've been totally encapsulated with all we've been going through with COVID and everything that's been going on, we had to break out of passivity by spring as God's people, so we could rise up and begin to pray more effectively because of the world conflict. Now, how he showed me the world conflict, and then you guys just pipe in, and I think I'll get more insight as you discuss things. But he showed it to me because he showed me the harvest sickle in heaven. That sickle was moving in heaven, and it was recreating how the nations were beginning to respond. And see, when heaven starts changing, earth starts changing, governments start changing. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, I could see the nations realigning in ways we have not seen them realign historically. I saw Russia. Now, previously I had written about how Russia would attempt by 2026 to regain all what they had given up during the dismantling of the old Soviet bloc countries. And so I saw the movement occurring. And I really saw how the nations were beginning to make this incredible shift. And we might want to talk about that really with Russia, the Russia-Ukraine incidents, because that's going to do, that's going to pull America into a place that I'm a little unsettled because of our current administration. Mm-hmm. But because it doesn't have the same backbone that is needed to take a stand the way we need to stand in days ahead. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, with the Olympics coming from China, I remember when God just outlined China for me starting in 1986 through 2026. Some of you out there, you have to understand, we are changing so rapidly in the earth that we are changing so rapidly in the earth that it will be hard for us to recognize exactly who we are by 2026.
We are in a season of war. We're, and the thing to realize is that we are not to be afraid. but we are to pray like we have never prayed before. We have a prayer army, a massive prayer army in the earth that
See, I think we're better equipped, Cindy and Mike, than we've ever been. And I believe we are actually stronger now than what we have ever been. We're beyond just a prayer army, and we're an apostolic, prophetic Judah structure that is ready to decree and go to war.
You know, Cindy, they could almost tell you what's getting ready to happen. And the thing that always concerns me is if we filter what is getting ready to happen through our own grid rather than hearing what God says about what's happening, then we can start praying in the wrong direction and actually hinder what God's trying to do in this season.
Absolutely, Mike. That is so key to understand that, because we have to remember we're a part of the kingdom. We're a nation above all nations. And God's not going to do anything without first telling his prophets. And even though world situations are occurring and aligning, we have to remember this whole decade is about our voice being projected into all of that. And so we have the dimension of decree that is necessary to change what needs to be changed right now.
Yeah, and I think also, Chuck, the graphic that you had of the picture of the Lion of the tribe of Judah facing down the dragon and both voices roaring at the same time is so accurate in terms of what we're seeing this season.
Mike, that is so key. And really, it comes from, that picture comes from Revelation 12. Anytime we're in a new era or a brand new season, the dragon rises up. It says it right there in Revelation 12. Because of the new birth that was coming, the dragon rose up, and it becomes a 3-year crisis. See, we are now actually moving toward that 3rd year of the crisis that we're in. Now, that should excite us because, and you know, most of us don't see it as an exciting type thing. Like Cindy said, it's not a fearful thing because the book of Revelation is becoming more real to us. The book of Daniel is becoming more real to us. And so it becomes important that we press into a depth of the word that we have never pressed in before, and that we interpret the world. Cindy used to say this all the time. Interpret the world from the word. And that's exactly what you're saying right now. We must interpret the world from the word.
Yeah. You know, do you have any sensing about what's going to happen, you know, in Ukraine? I know the people of Ukraine are really praying, and I know the people of Russia are praying. We both are connected with both sides, and I grieve, you know, knowing, you know, we were just crying out last night for the people on Ukraine that might be on a kill list. You know, we've heard, of course, we don't know that there's this kill list. And we were just crying out for God to save, you know, but yet we so dearly love the Russian church. And I feel an internal angst in of myself right now, although I totally am against what's happening in this invasion. You know what I mean? But
I think that's where we have to remember who we are. Now, I will say this. We got this last week, and it is a signet ring from the Ukraine. It comes from the Jewish heritage in the Ukraine. It's got the Lion of the tribe of Judah on it. Now, some way or another, God got this to us. It came with Cyrillic alphabet. And he is saying the Lion of the tribe of Judah is going to rise up in the Ukraine. But with that, we have to remember that there were 2 nations in all of that Russian structure that were really aligned more with Russia, Ukraine, Belarus. And when the Crimean things started happening and all of that started happening back in 2014, all of a sudden, Ukraine started saying, we want to be more free. We want to be free. Let my people go. Let my people go. We're back to the Bible. That's why it's so easy to understand some of these nations if you'll read it from the standpoint of God's people coming into their promise. And let's forget to talk about that before we end this. But they're saying we want to align, we want to pull completely out of our alignments with the Russian structure and align more with NATO. Well, you have to admit the leadership of Russia is very shrewd. And when I think of Russia, I think of leadership that is probably more shrewd than any on earth, because, of course, working with that structure since the 80s. And what they're going to begin to do is find territory that can be re-established back to them. In other words, what was given up, you have to think the way the Bible thinks. 7 times stronger. If you don't overthrow the strong man 7 times stronger, he comes back at you. Now, the Word of God says that. And they're going to start trying to absorb little by little any territory they can absorb and realign it back. See, we're in a season of realignment. Now, all of you listen out there, that's why we have to be realigned properly. Because when we're in a season of alignment, the world's going to start realigning. And Russia's going to start pulling back all of those structures that can realign itself with them. And it will be, I will tell you this, it will be a real war for the Ukraine to realign itself with freedom. And yet, when we received this ring, I asked the Lion of the tribe of Judah to rise up and begin to roar over the Ukrainian people. See, it's almost like our native people. The Ukraine people were forbidden to ever use their language again. They had to be absorbed by Russia. Now they're fighting back to regain their inheritance. Well, we've both written possessing at the gates and possessing your inheritance. You have to war to regain your inheritance. And they are in the war of their life to regain their inheritance. And it's not just a physical war, it's a spiritual war. That is so important for you to understand. Now, on the thing we can't forget is Russia, that all nations are revolving around their Israeli covenant. I think part of this is a distraction so Russia can establish itself with Iran better and with Syria better so they can target Israel. And because this administration that we're not with, that we presently have, is not pro-Israel, it puts us in real danger.